You're done here, Marcus. Effective immediately. Hand over your badge to security when you leave. My new boss didn't lower his voice when he said it. He wanted the room to hear, and the room was full. 2 state governors, U.S. Senator, 11 executives from the largest infrastructure investment firms in the country, and a deputy director from the Federal Highway Administration, who had flown in from Washington that morning specifically to witness the signing. We were 45 minutes from finalizing a $3.1 billion federal infrastructure grant that would reshape transit corridors across 4 states. Every signature page was tabbed. Every pen was uncapped. And my boss chose this exact moment to end my career. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 54 years old. I spent 22 years at Halloran Infrastructure Group building the public-private partnerships that kept this company alive when everyone else thought infrastructure was a dying business. I was the one who flew to Austin at midnight when the Texas DOT threatened to pull out of our first major project. I was the one who drove through a blizzard in January 2011 to deliver revised bond documents to a county commissioner in rural Ohio because FedEx had failed us. I was the one who sat across from 11 different federal program officers over 2 decades and earned the kind of trust you cannot buy, cannot fake, and cannot transfer with a termination letter. My boss's name was Derek Wall. 37 years old, appointed CEO 8 months ago by the private equity firm that acquired Halloran the previous spring. He had an impressive resume, Stanford MBA, a stint at McKinsey, a moderately successful real estate development firm he'd built and sold in his early 30s. What he did not have was a single day of experience navigating federal procurement law, bonding requirements, or the particular kind of patience it takes to build a relationship with a career government official over the course of years. Derek believed that confidence was a substitute for competence. He had spent 8 months proving himself wrong in ways only I seemed to notice. What he didn't know, standing there in the Capitol building conference room with his hand extended for my badge, was that I had spent the last 6 months making sure this moment would cost him everything. Let me tell you how I built it. January of this year was when I first understood what was coming. Derek had been in the role for about 2 months, and he called me into his office on a Tuesday afternoon with the particular energy of someone who had just discovered something he thought was a secret. He told me that the new ownership structure required a leaner leadership profile. He used the phrase relationship-heavy roles like it was a disease. I was 54. He was 37. I did not need a translator. I didn't say much in that meeting. I nodded. I asked a few clarifying questions about timelines. I thanked him for the candid conversation, which seemed to confuse him slightly. He had been expecting resistance. He got none. What I was doing instead was listening and calculating and beginning to understand exactly what I needed to do. The Halloran Federal Partnership Grant, what we internally called the HFPG, had been my project from the beginning. 3 years of groundwork, 14 formal proposal submissions, 4 rounds of revisions requested by the Federal Highway Administration. I had built the entire thing from the conceptual framework up, working directly with a deputy director named Gerald Okafor, who had been my counterpart on the federal side for going on 15 years. Gerald was meticulous, old school, and deeply skeptical of anything that smelled like corporate posturing. He trusted me because I had never once overpromised him anything. Everything I said I would deliver, I delivered. That kind of track record takes a long time to build. It takes approximately 1 bad meeting to destroy. The grant agreement had a signatory structure I had proposed during the 3rd revision cycle, and the federal team had accepted without much discussion because it aligned with their own internal risk management requirements. The structure designated a responsible authorized representative, an RAR, whose credentials were linked directly to the grant disbursement system at the federal level. The RAR's digital credential, issued by the Federal Grant Management Office after a background clearance process that took 4 months, was the final authentication required before any funds could be released. That credential was tied to a government-issued smart card. My smart card. The one sitting in my jacket pocket on the morning Derek Wall told me to hand over my badge. I want to be precise about what that meant. The state governors in that room could sign. The senator could sign. Every private equity partner at the table could put their name on every page. But without my credential authenticating the final federal compliance certification, the disbursement system would not release a single dollar. The grant would sit in administrative limbo, technically approved but functionally dead, until the Federal Grant Management Office processed a new RAR application, a process that took, at minimum, 4 months, possibly longer, because any change in authorized signatories during the active period of a grant agreement triggered an automatic compliance review. I had not hidden this structure. I had explained it in every briefing document, every executive summary, every kickoff meeting for the past 3 years. It was in the project Bible I had updated quarterly. It was the kind of detail that matters enormously to people who actually read the documents, and means nothing to people who only read the executive summaries. Derek read the executive summaries. What I did beginning in February was make sure that the people who mattered most understood the full picture, not as a threat, not as leverage, but as a professional responsibility. I sat down individually with Gerald Okafor in Washington in February, with the senior legal partner at the law firm advising 2 of the investment groups in March, and with a senior aide to one of the participating governors in April. In each conversation, I walked through the RAR structure in careful, neutral terms. I explained that federal grant agreements of this complexity were not like commercial contracts. There was no simple amendment process. Personnel transitions at the signatory level triggered mandatory review periods. The federal system did not accommodate last-minute substitutions. I framed every conversation the same way. I want to make sure you are protected. I want to make sure the years of work everyone has invested in this agreement are not jeopardized by an administrative gap. Each of them heard what I was actually saying. None of them told Derek. I need to step back and tell you something about the price I paid to get to that conference room in the first place, because it matters. My daughter got married in September of 2019. I was in Washington for an emergency hearing before the Federal Surface Transportation Board that had been rescheduled twice and could not move again without killing a different project entirely. I watched her walk down the aisle on a FaceTime call my son-in-law held up on a selfie stick near the altar. My daughter has not asked me to miss anything since then. She simply stopped inviting me to things she assumed I would miss. That's its own kind of grief, not the argument, but the quiet accommodation. The adjustment of expectations that tells you more about how you failed someone than any fight ever could. My father had a stroke in March of 2021 and died 3 days later. I was in Columbus, Ohio, finishing a presentation to a state infrastructure committee that had been 2 years in the making. I drove through the night to get home after the committee session ended. I made it for the last 4 hours. My sister has forgiven me. I'm not sure I've forgiven myself. I'm not telling you these things so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because when Derek Wall stood in that conference room and said I was done, he thought he was taking everything from me. He thought the only thing I had was my job title and my corporate email address. He did not understand that the things I had actually given up for this company were things no termination letter could touch. And the things I had built, the real things, the trust and the relationships and the quiet architecture of 2 decades of kept promises, those did not belong to Halloran Infrastructure Group. They never had. They belonged to me. The morning of the signing ceremony, I arrived at the Capitol Building conference room at 7:15. The session wasn't scheduled until 9. I arranged the materials the way I always arranged them, binders at each seat, tabbed to the signature pages, agenda cards, face up, a clean legal pad, and 2 pens at every position. I made a pot of coffee in the small break room and brought it in on a cart. The setup took 40 minutes. When Derek arrived at 8:50 with Jennifer Marsh, the 31-year-old strategic partnerships director he had hired 6 weeks earlier to shadow my role, he walked past me without acknowledgement and went directly to the head of the table. By 9:15, everyone was seated. The 2 governors had exchanged the usual pleasantries. The senator had made a brief opening statement about the significance of federal-state cooperation. Gerald Okafor from the Federal Highway Administration sat quietly at the far end of the table, a yellow legal pad in front of him, his reading glasses on. He had not looked at Derek once. I was walking Derek through the signature sequencing which page, which tab, which certification block needed to be initialed before the main signature when he put his hand flat on the table and stopped me. Marcus. He said it the way you say the name of something you're about to throw away. We need to address a personnel matter before we proceed. The room went still the way rooms go still when something has changed that everyone feels but no one has named yet. Your position has been restructured. As of this morning, you are no longer employed by Halloran Infrastructure Group. He said it to the room as much as to me. Jennifer will be managing the completion of today's process. Security has been notified. Please surrender your badge and any company property before you leave. I stood there for a moment. My hands were at my sides. My briefcase was against my right leg. Inside it, in the interior zip pocket, was my federal smart card in a slim government-issued holder with my photo, my credential number, and the Federal Grant Management Office seal in the upper left corner. I had known this was coming for 6 months. I had thought about this moment many times. I had imagined feeling angry, or vindicated, or afraid. What I actually felt was something quieter and more precise than any of those things. It was the feeling of watching a door close on someone else from the outside. I unclipped my Halloran badge from my jacket lapel, placed it on the table in front of me, picked up my briefcase, and began to walk toward the door. I was 3 steps away when Gerald Okafor's voice crossed the room. "Mr. Wall." Gerald did not raise his voice. He never needed to. "Before we proceed, I need to confirm the RAR credential status for today's certification." Derek looked at him. "The what?" "The responsible authorized representative credential for the federal disbursement authentication." Gerald's tone was the tone of someone who had asked this same question 10,000 times and was prepared to ask it 10,000 more. "Your grant agreement specifies that the RAR must authenticate the final federal compliance certification before disbursement processing can begin. The credential is smart card-based. I need to verify that the authorized credential holder is present and prepared to complete that step." There was a silence. "Jennifer can handle that," Derek said. The certainty in his voice was the particular certainty of someone who does not know what they do not know. "Miss Marsh is not the credentialed RAR," Gerald said. "The credentialed RAR for this agreement is Marcus Reed. That credential was issued after a 4-month federal clearance process and is non-transferable. A new RAR application would require a minimum review period of 16 weeks, during which the grant agreement enters administrative hold." He paused. "I can provide the relevant regulatory citations if that would be helpful." Derek looked at Jennifer Marsh. Jennifer Marsh looked at the table. One of the governors, the one from Pennsylvania, leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, just the way a person leans when they have just understood something important and are deciding what to do with the understanding. "Derek," he said, "how long has your team known about the RAR requirement?" Derek's jaw tightened. "I'm sure we can work through any administrative." 16 weeks, the Pennsylvania governor repeated. He said it to his aide, who was already pulling out a phone. "Our construction window closes in 11 weeks. The senior legal partner from Meridian Capital, one of the largest investment groups at the table, had been very still. Now he opened the grant agreement binder to a tabbed section near the back and slid it 12 inches toward the center of the table without looking up. "Paragraph 14, subparagraph C," he said, to no one in particular. "RAR credential must be authenticated at time of final federal certification. Non-compliance voids the disbursement trigger." Voids. That word. I was still standing near the door. I had not moved toward it. I had not moved at all. Gerald Okafor removed his reading glasses. He set them precisely on his legal pad, aligned with the top edge. In 15 years of working with him, I had learned that when he removed his glasses and aligned them like that, he was finished deliberating. "Mr. Wall," he said, "the Federal Highway Administration cannot proceed with disbursement authentication under the current personnel status. I would recommend your legal team review 23 CFR, Part 1.36, before this session continues." He closed his binder, set his pen on top of it. "I'll be in the hallway if you need me." He stood up, straightened his jacket, walked past me toward the door with the unhurried pace of a man who had nothing left to prove in that room. The Pennsylvania governor's aide was whispering into his phone. The Meridian Capital partner was on his laptop. The senator had turned to consult with his chief of staff in the low, rapid murmur that politicians use when a situation has shifted from ceremony to damage control. Derek stood at the head of the table. His portfolio was open to his notes. His notes, I knew, were talking points for a signing ceremony. They were not useful for this. "We can resolve this," he said. "There are always workarounds for bureaucratic—" "There are not," said the Meridian Capital partner, without looking up from his laptop. "Not in federal grant law. I have 3 attorneys who will confirm that in the next 10 minutes, but I already know the answer." The governor from Ohio, who had been quiet the entire morning, stood up. He was a large man, unhurried in everything he did. He straightened his jacket the same way Gerald had. "My office will need to consult with our federal liaison before we continue," he said. "Marcus." He looked at me, not at Derek, at me. "Is there somewhere you'll be this afternoon?" I told him I'd be at the coffee shop on the ground floor. I had been sitting at a corner table for 22 minutes when my phone began to ring. The first call was from Gerald. Short, direct, the way all his conversations were. He told me that the Federal Grant Management Office had been notified of the personnel disruption and had issued a standard administrative hold. He told me that his office had received 3 inquiries from participating parties in the past 15 minutes, asking about the path to reinstatement of a credentialed RAR. He told me, in the careful language of a federal official who cannot make promises on behalf of his agency, that the process for reinstating an existing credential holder who had not voluntarily relinquished their credential was significantly shorter than the process for certifying a new one. I thanked him. We had known each other for 15 years. He did not need to say the rest. Neither did I. The second call was from the Meridian Capital partner. 12 words. What would it take to bring you in as an independent advisor? The third call, 6 minutes later, was from a number I didn't recognize. It was the chief of staff to the Pennsylvania governor. He asked if I would be available for a call with the governor's infrastructure team the following morning. He used the phrase transition arrangement twice, which I understood to mean they were already thinking past Halloran. I ordered another coffee. I sat with it for a while and looked out the window at the plaza in front of the Capitol building. A maintenance crew was trimming the hedges along the south path. They worked at the unhurried pace of people who knew exactly what they were doing and had no reason to rush, because the work would be done right or it would be done again. I had always respected that kind of work. I had tried to do my own work that way. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I recognized immediately, one of the investment group executives I had briefed back in March. Short message. All it said was, "We'd like you at the table when this reconvenes. Your table, your terms." I put the phone face down on the coffee shop table and sat for a moment with the particular quiet that comes when something you have been carrying for a very long time has finally been set down. I need to tell you what happened in that conference room after I left, because I heard it from 3 different sources, and the accounts were consistent. Derek spent approximately 12 minutes attempting to convince the remaining parties that the credential issue was a transitional administrative matter that could be resolved within days. The Meridian Capital partner asked him to specify, on the record, which regulatory mechanism he was referring to. Derek could not. The Pennsylvania governor's aide, who had by then received confirmation from his office's federal liaison, read aloud from 23 CFR Part 1.36, the specific section Gerald had cited. The section was not ambiguous. A change in credentialed RAR during an active grant agreement period triggered mandatory administrative review. There was no expedited pathway. There was no exception for privately held companies undergoing ownership transitions. There was no workaround. The Ohio governor left at 10:47. The Pennsylvania governor followed 8 minutes later. The senator's chief of staff collected the senator's binder and escorted him out with the brisk efficiency of someone whose principal has other commitments and has decided this one is over. The investment group representatives departed in clusters, quietly, the way serious people leave rooms when the situation has become unfixable. Derek made phone calls. I could imagine them. I had made enough emergency calls in my own career to know the specific quality of desperation that enters your voice when you are realizing that a problem is not solvable by saying the right thing to the right person. Competence is not a relationship you can call in a favor from. I was in the coffee shop for 2 hours and 40 minutes. By the time I walked back to my car, I had 3 written meeting requests, 2 formal letters of interest forwarded to my personal email, and 1 voicemail from a consulting firm that specialized in federal infrastructure projects, asking if I was currently exploring new opportunities. 3 days later, I had a lunch meeting with Gerald Okafor and 2 representatives from the Federal Highway Administration's regional office. They walked me through the RAR reinstatement process. Because I had not voluntarily surrendered my credential, and because no federal compliance violation had occurred, the reinstatement pathway was, as Gerald had indicated, significantly abbreviated. 6 weeks, not 16. The administrative hold on the grant would remain in place during that period, but the grant itself was not at risk. The funding was still there. The agreement was still intact. It simply needed the right person at the table to complete it. I was not that person as a Halloran employee. Halloran had terminated me, but I was available as an independent infrastructure consultant. And the 3 investment groups, 2 state offices, and 1 federal liaison who had spent the past 3 days calculating their options had each arrived at the same conclusion. The fastest path to $3.1 billion in dispersed federal funding ran directly through me. I want to tell you about the moment I understood I had actually won, because it wasn't when the offers came in, and it wasn't when the reinstatement paperwork was filed. It was a smaller moment than that. My daughter called me 2 days after the Capitol building meeting. She had heard through her husband, who worked in state government, and had colleagues who had been in that building. She didn't ask me what happened. She just asked if I was okay. And then she said something she hadn't said to me in a long time. "Dad, are you going to be around for a while?" I told her I thought so. I told her I was thinking about changing some things. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I'm glad." Just that. 2 words, but they carried everything the last 5 years had not said. I set up my consulting firm 8 weeks after the signing ceremony that never happened. Reed Infrastructure Advisors. 3 employees to start myself, a former federal grant specialist I had worked with for a decade, and a paralegal who had spent 12 years in transportation law. Small, intentional. Exactly the size required to do serious work without the overhead of impressing people who weren't paying close enough attention to notice the difference. The reinstated grant agreement was completed in week 7 of my firm's existence. The signing ceremony was quieter than the one Derek had planned. No photographers, no prepared remarks, no performance of leadership. Just the relevant parties, the relevant documents, and the credential authentication that released the first disbursement tranche the following business day. Gerald Okafor handed me a pen when it was time to sign. It was a plain government-issue ballpoint, the kind that costs 40 cents and works perfectly every time. He didn't make a speech about it. He just handed it to me and said, "Let's get this done." That was enough. The final agreement value, with an amended scope that had been in discussion for months and finally found space to close, came in at $3.4 billion, $300 million more than the deal Derek Wall had tried to finalize without me. My first full-year revenue as an independent firm exceeded my final salary at Halloran by 62%. I have turned down 3 acquisition offers. I have no intention of accepting a 4th. As for my former boss, I heard about it through the kind of professional network that moves information without announcing itself. Derek lasted 11 weeks after the Capitol building meeting before Halloran's private equity owners made a change. The grant debacle had not been the only problem, apparently. It had simply been the most visible one. He is now a senior associate at a mid-sized development consultancy in Denver. He reports to a 58-year-old managing director who, from everything I've heard, does not use the phrase relationship-heavy roles. I think about him sometimes, not with satisfaction, exactly. More with the mild curiosity you feel about a lesson that cost someone else more than it needed to. He wasn't entirely wrong about the industry needing to evolve. He just made the mistake of thinking evolution meant replacement, that the new way of doing things had to stand on the grave of the old way, rather than learning to stand on its shoulders. Some people learn that lesson before it costs them something irreplaceable. Some people don't get the opportunity. I got a second chance at something more important than any grant agreement. My daughter and I have dinner every other Sunday now. I have missed exactly none of them since I started the firm. It turns out that when the work belongs entirely to you, when there is no C-suite above you to disappoint, no quarterly optics to manage, no political performance to maintain, it becomes possible to be a professional and a person at the same time. I spent 22 years believing those 2 things were in permanent competition. I was wrong about that. I was just working in the wrong place. There's a framed copy of the grant agreement cover page on the wall behind my desk. My name is in the signature block at the bottom right, not buried in the operational appendix, not listed as a supporting party. Just my name, my credential number, and my signature. Clean and permanent and completely mine. Directly below the frame, on the edge of the desk, I keep the government-issue ballpoint pen Gerald handed me that morning. It stopped working about 3 months ago. I haven't thrown it out. Some things you keep, not because they're useful anymore, but because they remind you of the exact moment you finally stopped building something for someone else to put their name on.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry. I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright. just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.
They say just forget. Move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. But now every empty moment still reminds me what is real. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence like losing something true.